on. And I will tell you this, Bud, we're going to have vigilantes, and very quickly.
You know what? Look, I'm going to stop playing the game. At first, I used to say I would not like to see vigilantes because I really believed it. Because then I pretended. Then I pretended like I didn't like vigilantes. But you know what? I got to be honest with you. I don't like vigilantes, but we better get them. Psychiatrist.
No.
It must be uncomfortable traveling with a prominent psychiatrist. People must stop everybody and say, "Who's that with Sam?"
Right. In any event.
Or in his case, they'd say, "Who's that with Angry Art?" Right?
Right. In any event.
Art, I'm going to leave you now because I don't know what that means. You know what? It means nothing. They are going to intercede.
No,
Thank you, Art. I'm getting tired now.
Right.
Thank you. Call your psychiatrist, prominent psychiatrist friend. Tell him I need him. Well, the only thing, I'll tell you what I'm hoping for. As a matter of fact, I'm going to make a novena that one of the other inmates puts a shiv right in his heart.
I hope so.
It would be retributive, poetic justice.
And it would be justified. Because he's nothing but a no-good, dirty bum. And he described the murder.
Right. Of course, I've been making novenas that they get Berkowitz and nothing's happened.
Right.
Thank you very much.
All right, sir.
Well, you know what? This is a great society. You got to pray that somebody in the slammer gets a David Berkowitz or a Jack Henry Abbott. That's the only surcease you get as a citizen. He gets no relief from the courts. The police are powerless other than to arrest a guy, put him in, and see the guy come out again. He gets no relief from the system. As a matter of fact, the system takes his tax dollars and pays these skunks who are public defenders, who are the most brilliant attorneys that ever lived. These guys make Bennett Williams and F. Lee Bailey and all those other guys look like amateur knights. Give me a public defender any time. These guys are fantastic. I mean, really? Is there a public defender in the house? I mean, it's ridiculous. Our own tax dollars. That's like an army buying the bullets for the other army to shoot at it, you know?
Right. But vigilante squads?
Well, it's going to happen. I mean, you know, officially, I'm not suggesting it.
Right.
Because I don't want anybody coming to me and saying, "Well, that guy shot that guy because you said so on the radio." No, I don't want that. But what I'm saying is, as a commentator, I predict if something isn't done soon, vigilantism will bring about the dramatic changes that I predict will take place in this country by the year 2000. Now, if it's against the law to make predictions, then what we ought to do is tear down the Criswell Memorial.
Right.
Yes,
Bleeding Hearts, who are always talking, I call them the mea culpa group. They go around saying, "Where have we failed this man?" They don't stop to think that these people are born bad. They want to commit crime. They think nothing of killing someone.
Yeah.
They're heartless people, and they just don't want to understand that these people are just predators. I have worked in some of the worst places in the city.
Yeah.
Where I met, they think nothing of the stealing or anything. You know what's wrong? Getting caught. That's the only thing, being caught.
Even when they are caught. Now, I have many friends involved in various police agencies in the tri-state area. Many friends, some of the best friends I have. And more are telling me that the thing that makes their job the toughest of all is to see the smug expressions on the faces of people that they arrest, the insouciance that these people have, because to them it's nothing. It just means that they're going to go get booked, they'll get fingerprinted, have a few mugshots taken, so forth and so on. But that's in all likelihood about all that will happen.
But you know,
I'm honest. What we need is more of what happened up in the Bronx. Did you see where residents went on a rampage of revenge when two men... It's a real story. Some of you may know of it. Two men brutally stabbed to death a woman neighbor. The two allegedly, we say the word allegedly, plunged a knife into the belly of Maria Lopez. Maria, the mother of two, attempted to flee a tenement at 1375 Nelson Avenue. But incensed neighbors of the woman gave chase. Now, I understand that a detective said that police arriving shortly after found a melee going on. They had to ward off the people who wanted revenge before they could make the arrest. It's too bad that the cops got there when they did. Because had they not got there, who knows what the neighbors of Maria Lopez would have done to Thomas Ruiz and his brother Joseph. At any rate, the Ruiz brothers were arrested. They were charged with second-degree murder and attempted murder. The pair who lived in the building were said to be acquaintances of Miss Lopez. That's right, even though she has a couple of kids, it's still Miss Lopez, or was Miss Lopez. Years ago, with the great Al Spagnola, talking about my speech at the Newtown High School in Elmhurst, Queens, the night we attempted to rally some of our legislators back in the 70s against the invasion of all these illegal aliens. Mr. Trimboli pointed out that there is an enclave from Colombia that he said there are apartments with wall-to-wall Colombians here illegally that would spell nothing but trouble. Anybody want to buy any cocaine, like maybe about $15 million worth? Here to the slaying over the weekend of a couple from Colombia, a couple of no-good skunks who really deserved what they got. Unfortunately, they had two lovely babies. I mean, cute little cuddly little boy, little girl. And the babies were killed along with Carmen Cintron and her husband, Orlando Galvez. But certainly no one's going to shed a tear for Carmen and Orlando. The question is, how did they get in my country? How did they get in our country, these invaders? This crime, my fellow Americans, I can tell you, is a consequence of the laxity in the Department of Immigration and Naturalization. I have called the illegal aliens invaders. I used that term in 1972 at the Sunnyside Gardens in Queens. A reporter who was covering the event and heard my speech said, in an exaggeration and a display of emotional demagoguery, Bob Grant referred to these people as invaders. Indeed, they are invaders. And they are creating as much havoc as they would be if they were an invasion of enemy troops, armed to the teeth, coming in landing boats. There is an invasion of untold hundreds of thousands, yea, millions. And their weapons are the most insidious, deadly weapons of all. Drugs. $16 million worth of cocaine would go a long, long way. How many brains would those 16 million worth of cocaine, would that $16 million worth of cocaine scramble? How many lives would it destroy? Directly and indirectly. I weep not for Carmen and Orlando. I can only say that the other Carmens and the other Orlandos should be rounded up and sent back to Bogota immediately.
Because of the great ways in Colombia, why can't we give it to these addicts, just like methadone? Send them to the clinic, give them what they want, let them kill themselves.
Absolutely.
Because they're not going to rehabilitate.
No such thing as rehabilitation.
No, because I have a nun who worked among the ghetto, and I asked her, what percentage? And she says, like 1/8.
Forget it. There's no rehabilitation.
No such thing. So give them what they want.
Once they get hooked on this heavy stuff, there's no rehabilitation. That's it.
Right, so just give it to them and let them...
Give them uncut. Give them an uncut dose. Absolutely.
Then they won't have to kill for the money to get it.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Thank you, dear.
That when it comes to important issues, you don't see any of these people. They're gone there on junkets. Steve Solarz is all over Africa.
Steve, listen, I want to tell you something. I give Steve a lot of credit. The man is versatile. And very peripatetic. I used to go to UJA breakfast when I was a speaker for UJA back in 76, 77, and I would see him every Sunday at a different center, pledge $500 for UJA.
Right.
And it was somebody told me it was the same $500. You know,
all over.
He'd pledge in Midwood, then he'd pledge in Ocean Parkway.
$500.
You know, and everybody goes, oh, but I love these guys that go, same as last time. And then you look at the card, it says last time, donation, bump kiss. You top my line, bump kiss. or if a guy who doesn't want to sound too cheap, he says, high plus 5. Thank you, sir. WMCA saluting Rod Ross today because this is Hire the Handicapped Week at 5:30. Over your
blood that I've been hearing from all your listeners. It's only fair that I have a chance to give a little voice to the liberal view. It seems every time someone calls up as a liberal, he's always referred to as that phony liberal. I don't think that's particularly fair. I don't think it's just. As a matter of fact, I see the conservative view, which you espouse, and a lot of your listeners as well, as being kind of phony, really. Because on the one hand, you'll say that human life is sacred. Nobody has the right to kill another human being. And yet, if this guy, Henry Abbott, happened to have been told by Uncle Sam or his company commander to go out and kill whoever is dressed in another uniform in a war, he would be applauded as a hero. And so...
Well, I think you're making a terrible mistake if you want to equate the legitimate service to one's country in a war and acting as an individual taking a human life on one's own initiative for nefarious reasons.
No,
if you really, hold on a minute, if you really equate the two, if one is no different than the other in your eyes, then there's absolutely nothing I could say to you. You have negated even the semblance of a discussion.
I don't negate human life.
You have foreclosed the discussion because apparently, where you're concerned, there's no such thing as a law, as nationhood.
The only law is that all human life is sacred. This is all that I'm saying.
Well, I'm saying that all human life is not sacred, that once a person has murdered a fellow human being, then his life is no longer sacred. He has dehumanized himself as well as creating a dead body out of a once living, vibrant person. You and I, we don't come up to some guy and say, hey, we're going to electrocute you. First of all, there is no death penalty, so this is all academic. But anyway, if there were, it isn't that we arbitrarily come up to someone and say we're going to electrocute you. That person commits a wanton act, and after due process and appeal, has declared forthwith that he has forfeit his right.
Who gives anyone the right to go ahead and pull this?
Well, who gives anyone? You know who gives anyone?
The human being.
Who gives anyone the right to tax
Just
your? Hold on a minute. Who gives anyone the right to tax your income? To tell you that going over 65 miles an hour is violating the speed limit. Who gives anybody the right?
Let me ask you just one thing. Supposing someone is terminally ill and he begs to be killed because he just can't take it anymore. Why is it that his wish is not being granted?
Well,
and you decide that he should go on and live and suffer.
Someday, who says his wish is not being granted? They're pulling the plugs more and more. But you see, you are now trying to change the subject.
No, I'm saying that there's an inconsistency.
Hey, you know what's pathetic about this conversation?
What?
No matter how wrong and how misguided and how, I'm afraid to say, ill your point of view is, you're in the driver's seat because we're doing things your way. All that you hear on the Bob Grant program is just talk. You're correct on that. It's just talk. And you know what, pal? And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I hope today, before the day is over, you get mugged and get mugged good. WCA admits that the criminal is wrong. Well, thank you, sir.
Wait a minute, Bob. Hear me out. I'm admitting that he's wrong, but also, being that this is a dope-related thing, he's also a victim. Now, I like to change...
I don't accept that. The criminal is not a victim. The criminal is a perpetrator.
All right, listen, Bob, hear me out.
Victim.
I like to change the direction, attacking it from the angle of the legal crook. Like the dope coming in, who's protecting them, how does it get in? After all, there's billions of dollars worth of dope.
All right, all you people who have been mugged, robbed, raped, all you people who have been thrown down elevator shafts and miraculously recovered, all you people who have had your throats cut and miraculously recovered, all you people who are the parents of murdered children or the children of murdered parents, Please keep in mind the overview. This gentleman wants the overview. Sir, you know what? You're making me ill. WMCA, hello. I can't take it. I cannot take it. I mean, Dorothy Rabinowitz was right. The 1960s are still here. Hello.
Question I'm asking. Is there a law that says that chief surgeon who listened to the tapes can't testify as to what was on them?
He can.
Yeah, what the hell was all this fuss about? Can we get the tapes? You got that one witness, and I don't understand. And another thing, isn't it? She can keep her tape. She doesn't have to testify against the husband. But the other tape, they have as much right to that tape as the lawyer has, don't they?
Well, Mario Morello was on this program.
Yeah.
Not this program, on this radio station. He was on with colleague Barry Gray last week. And Mario Morello said they've been trying to get the tape ever since January 6th, I believe he said. They haven't been able to get it yet. Because the law doesn't care whether a person's guilty or not. They just want to protect the accused. All you got to do is be accused. Make sure you're accused, and you got all the protections of the world and then some on your side.
Well,
the innocence or the guilt of Dr. Rosen is not important in the eyes of the law. What's important is those tapes should be protected.
Well,
have to go some to really change it, because there's a group of people in Washington that get $72,500 a year, plus lavish expense accounts, plus all kinds of perks, fringe benefits, and it's a lifetime job. They're called Supreme Court justices, and the Supreme Court has got to still get rid of Miranda and a couple of other insidious decisions which have hamstrung the prosecutorial efforts in this state, in this city, in this nation. There's so much. But look, it's useless, because did you hear the last two callers, the two individuals ahead of you?
Yeah, Bob.
Those guys should go out and celebrate, because no matter how much we talk, no matter how many people are mutilated, are robbed, are raped, no matter how much crime is rampant, their thinking is orthodoxy when it comes to the way we prosecute. Thank you, sir. Hey, wouldn't that be something? President Koch. I'd love to see him have a meeting at the summit with Brezhnev. Now, you might say, if he takes office in 1985 and has a summit meeting, Brezhnev will be gone by then. Now, guys like Brezhnev, skunks like Brezhnev, go on and on and on. They never croak. Hey, did you notice that? They never croak.
Grant?
Yes.
Hello, Bob. I used to be an illegal alien in the United States. I'm now a legalized resident. I went to Pace University. I went to Harvard. I have a good job. I just feel that...
what country did you deprive your talents of, sir?
I did not deprive my talent of any country, Bob.
Well, you must have, because you said you came into this country illegally. That means you skipped out of your country and came to my country.
Oh, exactly. Bob, I think you are second or third generation American. Your parents also...
Pal.
Yes, sir.
The illegality of your entry into my country. How did you achieve it?
How did I achieve? Bob, I came on a student visa.
And you just stayed over. From what country, sir?
A country in Africa. I don't wish to be specific. I don't want to give up my...
In other words, you're ashamed.
No, I'm not ashamed of the country I came from.
Well, hey, pal.
Yes, sir.
If you're not ashamed, then why do you withhold?
Okay, I'm from Ghana, in West Africa.
Ghana.
Yes, sir.
I don't believe you. Due to the fact that industries are collapsing in this country, the unions are going to find themselves out of more and more jobs. Now, ever since they passed the Wagner Labor Relations Act, which, by the way, as long as everybody had this orgy of the 100th anniversary of FDR, even FDR thought the 1937 legislation was a bit much and went pretty strong. But he signed the bill, even in spite of his misgivings. Like in all things, human nature tends to redress one wrong by creating another. The two dissenting letters said, we don't want to hear any more about crime. We want to forget it. We're sick and tired of hearing about it. Your program is the only program that deals with crime. This is the essence of what those two said. Nowhere else do we hear about crime the way we do on your program. Well, that's not exactly true. If you pick up any newspaper any time, even the New York Times, which tries to minimize at least the typographical impact, the fact is you're going to hear about crime. But I tell you that until we make some radical changes, not in our thinking, because the thinking at least is expressed on this program, is all right. But not until we change what we do about that thinking will we see any difference.
Make a couple of comments. One on this, how did this get your file? I don't know if I'm sure you probably heard about it. With this judge gave this defendant the choice of flipping a coin to find out what his sentence was going to be.
Oh, that was no judge. That was no judge. That was Alan Freese. He's no judge.
Well, I mean, Mr. was quite upset about it.
Freese is no judge. You know, even though I don't think the judiciary is in the highest esteem, to call Alan Freese a judge is really an insult to all the other judges. But I'm sure you heard about a man known as criminal court judge. His name is Alan Freese. He was censured last year for letting a female murderer spend the night at his home. The one who was on trial for murdering her 4-year-old. Well, he has allowed, in case you don't know, he has allowed the flip of a coin to determine a jail sentence for a pickpocket. That's right. He's the same Alan Freese who sparked citywide controversy by taking an accused murderess home for Thanksgiving in 1980. He said he sanctioned the coin toss because he wanted the defendant to decide his own fate. And even Robert Morgenthau, easygoing Bob, the Manhattan DA, whose assistant John Jordan prosecuted the case, called the incident outrageous. I think Mr. Freese should be removed from the bench immediately. I think he has indicated that there is something distressing him, and to allow him to continue is to take part, by default perhaps, but nevertheless to take part in the travesty. This judge was appointed by Eddie Koch in 1979, and it's got to be an embarrassment to even Ed Koch, although Ed Koch wouldn't let on.
Headline on page 1 of the Science Times today. It says, quote, social scientists say U.S. crime has leveled off. And what was even more incredible, there were 2 quotes from a professor of criminal justice at Rutgers. First, he says, an enormous amount of fear has been generated for reasons I don't understand. He then says, our best evidence shows it is no more a problem than it ever was. It's certainly not getting worse. Now, I know living in New York City, my mother still lives in the Tremont section of the Bronx. And she was mugged last winter.
Yes.
And the policeman, when I went to the station house, the policeman told me, tell your mother she doesn't belong in that neighborhood anymore.
Did you hear what this gentleman just said, ladies and gentlemen? Tell your mother she doesn't belong in that neighborhood anymore.
And I just looked at the policeman. I couldn't answer him. I just couldn't answer him. There was no.
What can you say to such an absurd statement?
Very much.
Congratulate whoever is responsible for the city edition of the New York Post today. They've hit an all-time. Is it high or is it low? There's a picture so grotesque that you have to laugh at first because you think it's someone with a Halloween mask. And, how graphic can you get? The only thing they didn't show was what the man looked like inside after an autopsy, if indeed there was an autopsy. It says, the caption, the victim of a brutal rub-out lies gruesomely in his rented car in Midtown Manhattan last night. And the man has so much blood, which came out of his nostrils and his mouth, that he at first looked like Fu Manchu. You thought, he had a Fu Manchu mustache. That was not. It was blood. And I don't know. Do you approve of these graphic photos?
You had told her, had you had been the old Bob and not the benevolent Bob or the easygoing Bob, you would have told her what to do. Now, the point I'm making is, when I listened to your show in New York, your format was so much different. You were like kind of violent in a way, How come you mellowed out?
Well, I guess I just mellowed because of all the of all the splendiferous, luxurious life I've had.
Well, I'll tell you. Don't say it to me.
I mean, I've gotten spoiled, I guess, because of all the largesse that has accrued to me.
Bob, just one more thing.
Yes.
Don't say it to me, but I really miss you telling Sherman, get off the phone, you creep.
You do miss that.
Yeah, but don't say it to me.
Isn't that interesting? I appreciate your adherence to Bob Grant, Steve.
Okay, Bob, take care.
Thank you.
How's Needlenose Menage doing?
He did very well. He picked San Francisco, in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He completed his work release program. They checked him out of Lewisburg. While he was doing his Lewisburg stint, he lost weight, learned how to play gin rummy, learned how to play bridge. No, the bridge he learned at Danbury at another time.
Hey, Bob, also...
Also plays a bit of paddle ball.
What about...
Yes?
What about that guy that called after the lady who was built out of $200,000? You said you were going to get his phone number to send him over to break the guy's head.
What about him?
Remember that guy?
Yes, I did get his phone number. And on his way over to that lady, to that guy's house,
Really?
somebody broke his head.
Okay, Bob, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Steve, I'm glad you're not a cajon. Well, I would suggest you lie down. You know what my grandma used to recommend? Take a little washcloth and dip it in vinegar.
That I did before.
And then fold it on your forehead and lie down for a little while. And if that doesn't work, there's a place out in Queens in Jamaica where you can get leeches and let them...
No, there's no place in Queens for leeches. The only place you get leeches is in Philadelphia drugstore. The oldest drugstore in the country.
Howard would know. On Dubs...
But at the same time, in another region of the world, it does upset me that Reagan continues to supply military aid to the regime in El Salvador despite the disclosure of recent atrocities by the government against innocent people. Now, see, I know that Cuba...
What disclosure? Whose disclosure?
Well, there were disclosures that...
Whose disclosure?
Well, I read it in the New York Times today, for example.
Yeah, so here we go again. Here we go again. Once again, the New York Times and other publications trying to highlight something that really is tangential to the issue. Okay. And God forbid, we should try to keep El Salvador from becoming another Castro outpost. God forbid.
I know that...
Hey, Atso Manajiran.
Shouldn't resort to these psychiatrists like Goldfeld or the psychiatrist.
Oh, Dr. Elise Goldstein.
Yeah, you shouldn't continue with her line of thinking. Now, what I'm calling about is algebra and geometry. Evidently, sir, you've never built a house.
I myself, no. I bought many and sold many, and I lost each and every time because there are a bunch of crooks out there in California. But, no, I've never built one.
A boy from Chicago said, no, don't believe him. So you're absolutely right about the New York Times. One more point I would like to make. May I make it?
Absolutely, ma'am.
All right. Now, these people...
No, I wouldn't make a mockery of God, ma'am.
You did...
Well, that's your interpretation.
It's Mr. Farber, and one point. He's for Israel first. I'm not for Israel first. I'm for my American country first. He's a hypocrite.
What do you do when you're not rambling?
I'm always working because busy people are happy people.
And the Devil's Workshop is an idle mind.
That's right.
I see. How do you sleep, ma'am? With long underwear or what?
Well, I built the little pool house. It wasn't such a little one, 25 by 27 feet.
You did?
Out of cement blocks with a maid that I had. She didn't like to do housework.
You had a maid?
At one time I did. I don't have now. And that's why I'm always busy working.
I see. What about what's his name?
Oh, he's 77, and he's in Europe, and he's working hard, too.
What is he doing working hard? Is he building an extension of the canal in Venice or something? What is he doing?
He's not doing what building, what is it, that line from Europe into Russia, which Reagan doesn't want built, but Arthur Burns went there and said, we're going to build it.
Do you ever have any fun? Do you ever have any fun?
Do I have any fun?
Yes.
I certainly did. I was out in a restaurant, and I had chocolate fondue with this...
Fondue? This lady had a fondue in a restaurant.
Yes, sir.
Fondue?
I'm not going to tell you what town. But it's in Connecticut. I'm calling from Connecticut.
Ah, one of them swells.
I'm one of those swells. I've worked very hard.
Do you have any heirs?
Do I have any heirs?
Yes.
Well, what do you mean, children?
Well, children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews.
Are you trying to find out how old I am, Mr. Grant?
No, it isn't. No. I wouldn't be so gauche. I would just like to worm my way into your will, that's all.
Well, I've attended Mr. Scheuer's lectures last year, so he hasn't put off the radio like they do when people do speak the truth.
Well, he's under investigation right now, as you probably know. They're holding him there. Right now he's being held in a bank vault in Midtown Manhattan.
That's what they do.
That's right. As a matter of fact, they're going to test the airlock procedures of that particular vault and leave him there overnight. And they're leaving a little yellow canary with him to see who goes first, Scheuer or the canary.
With your influence with the Italian mafia, not the Jewish mafia, with the Italian mafia, why, you should be able to run a line so he can help all us girls with our investments.
Ma'am, I'm delighted to know that there isn't a trace of bigotry or prejudice
No, not a trace.
in your shriveled little brain. 5 nights a week in a work-release cottage near the Nassau County Jail. Isn't that... How is any... He steals $44,000, and that's what he gets. For 60 days, he has to sleep in a work-release cottage near the Nassau County Jail. Oh, by the way, in that cottage, there he will have a private bath and a TV. Yeah, you know, when I was a youngster, I really believed that crime doesn't pay. I really believed it, and I'm sure you did too.
Even Weinberger says that Begin appears as a moderate compared to many Israelis, and he mentioned that 1 million of them, which is about a third of the population, signed a petition against the withdrawal of Israel out of Sinai. He also mentioned that they had a demonstration of 100,000 people calling for the expansion of Israel to the borders of the Nile and the Euphrates, which would give them the eastern half of Egypt and most of Syria, Lebanon, Transjordan, and Iraq. And then he mentioned the secondary school students. They took a poll, and 60% of them favor the physical expulsion of all non-Jews from Israel and the occupied territory.
Yeah, Bob, what town in New Jersey are you calling from?
Union.
You're not too far from River Edge, are you?
Yes, I semi. I'm just...
But, Bob, you call virtually every week with the same anti-Israeli diatribe without variation.
Don't have to cut me off. I'm not going to make a dope out of you. You've done that by yourself.
Thank you. That was very clever. Beautiful. That's beautiful. I didn't hang up on him. He hung up on himself. Okay. Frank.
Yes, Bob. Bob, the American Cancer Society tells us that for our own health, a cancer that is detected early can be cured early. And when a cancer invades the intestines of a healthy body, do we call in a psychiatrist to talk to it? Do we call in a social worker that's going to explain it through some wacko theory? No. When you have a cancer, a malignancy, we simply cut it out. And the subways are the steel and concrete intestines of this city. But, Bob, they have been infested by two-legged malignancies. Malignancies that at an early age have published their own Mein Kampf, their own plan for their war on society. And the liberals simply sit back and allow them to continue their campaign of fear, brutality, and terrorism. Bob, it is now 1 minute to midnight. The beachhead has been established. They've plundered and sacked the surrounding area. They're battering down the gates of our civilization. Are we to stand meekly and allow the liberals to send us to the gallows? Or are we going to stand and fight back?
Is Admiral La Rocque. I'm talking about Rear Admiral Jeane R. La Rocque, United States Navy, retired.
Gaddafi has never been very happy about the fact that we've been operating right off of his coast in the Gulf of Sidra. Now, we, in a sense, set him up a little bit for this. We, in a sense, enticed him out for this fight. Although it took place in international waters, we flew around there in such a way that he was intrigued to come out and do battle, and of course we shot his 2 planes down. I don't think we really ought to be going around the world provoking actions. I think as a great world power, we ought to be acting very responsibly and trying to prevent wars rather than trying to start them. much more exercised now because they have become aware that we are planning to fight a nuclear war in Europe, planning, training, and arming to do that.
Well, it does take two to tango. What about the other side?
Oh,
Who's going to put
absolutely.
pressure on Brezhnev and company?
Absolutely. I think it's two sides have come together in this arms race. Both countries will be destroyed in the event of an attack by either side. But it's the United States who's been holding up the SALT II treaty. The Soviets agreed to it 3 years ago. We can't even get it through our Senate.
But do the Soviets really keep any of their treaties anyway? What good is it signing a treaty with the Soviet Union when they don't live up to their word?
Well, now, first of all, we have some existing agreements with the Soviet Union that total up to about 60. 11 of those are strategic agreements. Of those 11 strategic agreements we have with the Soviet Union, they are religiously living up to every one of them. Forces into foreign countries, and we're trying to defend a good portion of the world. We still keep 500,000 men, 500,000 men, uniformed men and women in foreign countries.
You're on the air.
I heard the good Admiral and Tom Gervasi and an Eric Shinen, I think. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it.
Tom Gervasi, I believe, has made the statement that he is a Marxist.
Well, I heard him the other morning, and I couldn't get through because they weren't taking callers. But I want to tell you something. Beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. I feel like I'm getting my hands tied without rope. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
And I can't see a military man think like this. And you said about Russia and keeping promises. Well, in the Yalta agreement, they were supposed to make the Eastern Bloc countries free democratic elections.
Was it Mr. Gervasi has gone on record, has he not, that he is a Marxist?
Well, first of all, I don't know anything about him, and if he has, that surprises me very much. But I was invited by Arlene Francis to appear on her show with Dr. Chivian of MIT and the Harvard Medical School, and in fact, I didn't even know he was coming, and I didn't know Tom Gervasi was coming, who I had never met before in my life. And I must say that in the 1 hour program, there was nothing in there that would indicate anything to me.
Been compared from time to time, and not favorably compared, with my dear friend and esteemed colleague, Barry Farber. There have been those who have said that he has taken up the cudgels of anti-communism with firmer hands and a more dedicated mane than I have. Well, I'm not out to win any prizes as being the most anti-communist or the most pro-American person on the airwaves in America today. That is not my intent. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 2 days, however, I'm deeply concerned with what I believe is a rather curious coincidence. Yesterday on this broadcast, an ex-admiral, commander of the 6th Fleet, sounded as though he were an apologist of the Kremlin and sounded as though he had been indeed brainwashed. If you heard him, you don't need me to explain. But today, on another broadcast, conducted by... At the very end of the program, the interviewer said to the guest, who was one of the Hollywood 10, who was an individual who did indeed espouse the socialist, Marxist, communist philosophy, he said, what about this administration? Now, this was at the end of the program. What about this administration? What do you think? And the person answered, I think this administration wants to get us in war. This administration has to learn that we can't go around bombing other countries. And that was the end of the broadcast. No chance for the host, who could have, if he had chosen, tied his guest up in verbal knots. No chance, though, for the host to say a word. That was it. And I was so frustrated listening because I thought, why you, whoever you are, how dare you say that? How dare you ignore the fact that your beloved Soviet Union has marched into Afghanistan, has crushed the natural growth of freedom in Poland, has sent tanks into Prague, has sent tanks into Budapest, has stifled freedom everywhere it can, has destabilized the African continent, has armed Cuba to the teeth with offensive weapons, has resisted verification of any SALT agreements. And I want to know why a person like Lester Cole, he's not a household name, but he did write successful screenplays and obviously is a gifted literary person, why he would espouse the Soviet cause. I would like to know. Maybe there's something I'm missing. I cannot for the life of me understand why a person who has grown up in this country, who has taken advantage of all it has to offer, would espouse the Soviet cause. And I'm sure by now, those of you who are listening know I'm talking about the Barry Gray program. I'm not talking. But Mr. Gray asked Mr. Cole why he was the way he was. A logical question, a good question. Mr. Cole never really did answer. He did say, in an alleged answer, that his mother knew the streets weren't paved with gold. Now, you can ask for a tape if you don't believe me. His mother did know that the streets weren't paved with gold, but his father was always an activist. I want to know what kind of answer that is. There was the implication that somehow or other, because you had to work for the gold that was here, that the American dream was a scam. But I'm deeply distressed, because where some of the pinkos see echoes of McCarthyism, I see echoes of pinkism. Insidious, subtle, in a velvet glove, perhaps, which makes it even more dangerous. Because we can sit here and nod and smile and hear an ex-admiral, an ex-screenwriter, sound benign and human, and we can almost forget that Alexander Dubček in Prague in 1968 tried to put a human face on socialism, and those swine in the Kremlin would have none of it. George, you're really testing my patience, George.
Don't do that.
Because I'd love to tell you, you sound like a cavone. George, I really would. I'm dying to tell you sound like a cavone.
Tell me.
Okay, you sound like a cavone.
Don't say that.
Oh, okay, I didn't say it. So long, George.
All right. So long, Bob.
Okay. Opinion, the issue is, how does a person like Jeane La Rocque get that way? What happens to them?
I don't know what happens to them. They get
It's scary. You know, it almost makes me believe that the mind control that we were warned the Soviets were practicing has worked. Because you have a good number of Jeane La Rocques roaming around. Well, we'll see.
He said that the Soviets can be trusted to comply with any SALT agreement. When recently there was a CIA report from analysts in the CIA indicate that the Soviet Union has violated major provisions of the SALT I agreement.
Well, I almost fell off this chair, this nice new chair that they provided me. I almost fell right off of it when he said that. I looked at him, and I must tell you, the man had a strange look on his face, very strange look, almost like he was in a semi-comatose condition.
Yeah, who knows who got to him?
Well, that's what I keep thinking. I keep thinking that. Maybe he kept talking about satellites up in the sky that can see and do everything. Who knows? Maybe a guy by the name of Ivanov Borisov up there in a satellite is saying, La Rocque, look into my eyes. La Rocque, listen. La Rocque, the moon is made of green cheese. You understand, La Rocque?
And besides that, the satellite can't see everything. It only can see what the Soviets wanted to see.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
I think the American people are a little smarter than the La Rocques give us credit for.
On the one hand, they're criticizing the president for a huge deficit. On the other hand, they want him to spend more on social programs.
Well, they do, but they also didn't want the income tax cut. In other words, they think that even with the increases in Social Security taxes, that we should keep paying more and more income tax. As a matter of fact, the president has been too easygoing about this. He hasn't hit hard enough in reminding people that had Jimmy Carter been reelected, an income tax increase was in the works. Increase, not decrease, increase.
Yes, definitely.
You know, we had this orgy over FDR, and without going into whether FDR was good or bad, or right or wrong, or what have you, the fact is that Harold Ickes, one of the darlings of the New Deal, said, tax, 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 spend, 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 elect, elect, elect. And that is exactly what they did for a long, long time, till the American people started waking up and saying, hey, the bill is coming due.
And why is it that war atrocities by revolutionary communist terrorists and the terrorizing of peasants is accepted by the liberals as a consequence of war, yet the violent but necessary counterstrikes by pro-U.S. government forces is perceived as violations of human rights and repressive? I'm talking specifically about El Salvador.
Yeah, well, you could talk about El Salvador. You could have said the same thing to Nicaragua. You could have talked about virtually any country in the world where this type of thing has gone on.
But also Argentina and Turkey. You know, very few people realize that the reason for the military clampdown in Argentina and Turkey was because of bloody leftist violence that ravaged the countryside. And I'm sure if America were to experience the same violence of such a magnitude, the same thing would happen here. A military government would have to be formed.
Why is it that once a communist regime takes over, even in the case of Poland, where you had the mighty movement of 9.5 million people in solidarity, and all those solidarity members had family, why is it that even in Poland, where you had such a great counter movement, does the communist control grip ever tighter in the wake of resistance? Whereas when it's a non-communist government, no matter how totalitarian, they lose their grip. Why? What is it? Why would Duarte be losing in El Salvador? Why did Somoza lose in Nicaragua? Why indeed, had it not been for the overthrow of Allende, which I thought was one of the greatest things to happen in the 1970s, did he prevail in Argentina? Why is it that Batista was overthrown in Cuba, but they can't overthrow Castro? And I could go on, but I think I have made the point where you're concerned.
Well, there's a simple reason. The Soviet Union stands by their allies while we tend to abandon ours.
I think you've just hit on the point, and I think you are a little brighter than most people. Dubček was going to prevail in Czechoslovakia. In came the tanks. I was there. I interviewed his Minister of Economics, a Czechoslovak by the name of Edmund Goldstucker. Now, you may say, well, that's a German name. He was a Sudetenland Czechoslovak Jew. And he said, you know, there's nothing wrong with our economy that 400,000 little businesses wouldn't cure. Why he picked the word 400,000, the number 400,000, I don't know. He said that. I knew their days were numbered because the Russians are afraid of freedom. They fear freedom. Wait a minute. Don't think for 1 minute that this particular Admiral La Rocque is typical of all ex-admirals. Thank God he's atypical, Angelo.
Talking about how Mr. Reagan's program is failing, and we're spending less than 1% of our time talking about how we got here in the first place.
Isn't that something?
Just peaceful examples of specifics. Here you have this Stan Rather getting on interviewing the president and talking to him about his wife's dresses in the closet and this, that, and the other thing. And this is, a disgraceful example. Does this on the radio, he does it on the television, he's a disaster. And he's watched that interview by any chance?
No, mercifully, I was delivering a speech I probably wouldn't have watched it anyway because there's something about that particular interviewer, that particular news person that bothers me. He rubs, my hackles go up when he comes on.
Remember Daniel Shore by any chance?
Yes, of course.
He was another one.
Well, Daniel Shore definitely had certain political leanings and certain political I would say, telltale political signs that lean way over to the left. But he didn't annoy me like this man does.
But these...
Your perspective, they say, just a right-wing kook. But if you criticize from the other perspective, they say, oh, look at this intellect. This great intellect just wrote us, criticizing us. You understand? Really, I'm not saying that the Admiral is doing this consciously, but I'm sure he's unaware of it, as a matter of fact, but he is doing a great job for the Soviet Union.
His organization, what's it, Center for Defense Information?
Yeah, Defense Information.
You know what the parent organization is? Institute for Policy Studies, IPS. You familiar with that organization?
They are a real peacenik group.
Not peacenik, no. Have you read The Spike?
I guess what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is play 20 questions.
We're going to play 20.
You've asked me 4. We've got 16 to go.
Okay.
Would you tell me what you want to say?
I want to say,
and I'll tell you,
most people of the danger that they create in this country, and why do I say that? They consider that the imminent danger to themselves and to the country is from the far right, which is usually Nazi fascist. The reality, of course, the danger is from the far left. In fact, fascism and communism are exactly the same. Very influential in the media, they're in our academia, and they ought to be reminded of where the real danger comes from. They ought to be reminded that the Jews in this country, and again, fought against a quota system, but that they stand up for what we euphemistically call affirmative action, or busing, and all the things which when I once was a liberal, and I still believe, although now I'm a ultra-conservative, the same Jews are asking for their own defeat. We succeeded by our own inventiveness, our own ingenuity, without any special benefits, and now they want to cut to their own throats. There won't be a Jewish school teacher left in New York City because of affirmative action. They ought to understand that the Holocaust, there were 12 million people killed. But in Cambodia, there were 3 million people, 40% of the population. And they don't care about that. And that's the problem. And that's what brings about anti-Semitism. From the Amnesty International, and they have the usual list of terrible countries.
Yeah.
And guess, well, I don't want to ask you a question. I called up the author of the article.
No, well, okay. You learned quick. Go ahead.
I called up the author of the article, who happens to be listed here, and I asked him how come there's a glaring omission of all of the Eastern Bloc countries, and he answered me by hanging up the phone. And that's a common approach by Amnesty International, or it's a common approach by the media.
Crying out loud. Where's John Bulgakabajaka? What the heck is your name, anyway? Write it out for me, would you? Cavone.
Things. Either that Barry Gray was very kind to him because Mr. Cole was an elder gentleman, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Hungary, and various other communist countries. Well, no response to that from Barry Gray. The second thing, instead of asking him if you're still living with your wife, he should have asked him, you're from Poland originally yourself. Socialism, you believe in socialism. Well, why aren't you saying anything about what's happening in your own country in Poland? Nothing to that effect. I just cannot believe some of these questions and answers that we will have to listen to for an hour. Even a more plain fact is that this gentleman's father, he was born in Poland. He mentioned on air that his father was into trade unions. Well, there it is. Barry Gray should have said, well, under those conditions and what's going on right now in Poland, the people are trying to get a trade union, socialism, and the Russians won't let them do it. And there was no discussion to that effect at all. That's why I was wondering, how can anybody listen to that interview, have any credibility, even believe it? It was just nonsense, I thought, total nonsense. Like questions, where's your wife, and this and that.
Yeah, I'm just sorry to hear that Lester Cole is teaching at the University of California in San Francisco.
Absolutely. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. Bye. Well, that kicks things in the head for today for this get-together on the Bob Grant program. No, don't worry. I didn't forget that everybody should get Gaddafi, but I tell you, I'm somewhat of a masochist because I watch him every Saturday with James Kirkpatrick, whom I dearly love, George Will, whom I dearly respect, Hugh Sidey, and a fellow who is there because somebody's got to put it all together, Martin Agronsky. But I see Mr. Rowan week after week, and sometimes I just can't believe. I can't believe it, and then I look at him and I realize, of course he'd say that. Thank you very much.
It's excruciatingly boring.
I knew there was something not quite kosher with Mike, but I had no idea he was trafe from head to tail. Proceeded in a defense that said, in effect, she only meant to really shake her, didn't really think the child would die, although she hid the body and lied to the police. But anyway, I'm going to quote now. Mary Popick is going to prison for the slaying of her 6-year-old daughter. Law and order advocates may rejoice, prosecutors pat each other on the back, and court watchers marvel at justice in action. The system worked. Detectives ferreted out the young mother who strangled her child and then tried to cover up the killing. The courts brought her to trial to assure substantial punishment. The jury convicted her. The judge sentenced her. Justice is done. Case closed. But is it really? Is there a mother alive who believes Mary Popick's punishment will end after 10 years in prison or even 5 years, should she win parole? Are judges and prosecutors so hungry for revenge as to believe that they, representing the people, are the sole dispensers of the punishment of Mary Popick? If they do believe that, then obviously they do not relate to mothers. Child abuse, unfortunately, is common in our society. It is a nasty disease that afflicts parents but makes children its victims. It can be insidious, starting out small when children are small. A fierce vituperative scolding to a 2-year-old who has spilled her milk. A yank on the arm of a 4-year-old whining in a supermarket. Police are not called and the courts do not get involved. But the mother, in a confession to herself or perhaps another person, may feel remorse. She may never do it again. If the disease progresses, however, a yank on the arm may be nothing. Verbal abuse may be only a prelude to physical violence that puts children in hospitals or worse in graves. Despite the tragic result of her own violent outburst, Mary Popick seems to fit in the first category. Perhaps an incipient abuser, or perhaps just a nerve-racked mother brought to the brink. The trial revealed that she had been a good mother to her children, Teresa 6, Bobby 4, and a newborn baby, Kimberly. A witness was even willing to testify that she is, quote, the most tender and loving mother that a woman could be. But even tender, loving mothers get angry. Unfortunately for innocent little Teresa Duchess, her mother's anger turned murderous on January 9th, 1981. The child was playing with a brother and making too much noise. It was cold out and the baby was sick. Mrs. Popick may have had a headache or been menstruating. She had just lost her job. Teresa said something so upsetting to her mother that she wanted to live with her father, from whom her mother was divorced, as to make Mrs. Popick exceedingly furious. There was a rope. There was a heinous, unforgivable crime, the taking of life by the one who had given it. But as horrified as they might be by Mrs. Popick's act, many mothers can understand the components of that fateful day. Being stuck in the house with the kids, caring for a young, sick baby, hearing something from their child that incenses them. Most mothers, though, don't snap the way Mrs. Popick did. They might scream, scold, punish, and even spank. But even though they don't kill, they still may see a little, even a lot, of themselves in Mary Popick. Sandy Landman is a staff writer for the Home News. She herself is the mother of 2 children. And I think what she is trying to tell us on WMCA New York, that somehow or other we should say, well, yes, it could have happened to any of us. And what Sandy Landman has done is to commit an outrageous act of suggesting that each and every one of you who have raised your children, who are raising your children under perhaps even worse conditions than Mary Popick, are really no different than she is. And therein, my dear friends, therein lies one of the fatal flaws of our criminal justice system. It is the Sandy Landman mentality that has brought us to where we are today in this country. It is the mentality of those who would have you believe that a murder is just a slight aberration from the norm, that in the twinkling of an eye a person has crossed the line from decent human being to murderous and then back again. And it is that last part where the flaw lies. They do not cross back again. Statistics are overwhelming. And for anybody to say that Teresa's 6-year-old life was meaningless is in and of itself an obscenity. But to go even one step further and suggest that that was her way of expiating her nervous condition. No more, no less, is to not only deny the reality of a person's proclivities, but also to subject still more victims to Mary Popick's temper. And here's a case of the sainted JFK, who taped everybody because he was upset over leaks. And it embarrasses his brother Teddy, who has to come right on and say he wants the secret tapes released quickly. I had heard from a very good source that there were some tapes that had been excised because they would be too embarrassing to some of the people. And the subject they were talking about was women. And, well, at least they weren't fagulas. Thank you very much.
Looking Aryan fellow marched into a bank, and he went to 3 different tellers, and he gave them a note. He said, I lost my job, and Reagan is responsible for it. My family has to eat. Second statistic came this Saturday. It always happens when you're off. I get to talk to you about other things. This Saturday, they said, some guy, I couldn't catch his name, from the high schools or what, said that crime is very difficult. He said because the youth have become hardened and sophisticated, because they can't get a job, their parents can't get a job, and in addition to the ordinary statistics of the vermin, you know, which you always talk about, and I agree with, he said that now it has become a social problem due to Ronald Reagan and his economic theories, which is bleeding the poor for the rich. What you thought of this?
Well, it's so absurd that to waste any time thinking about it is, of course, ridiculous. I can't believe that anyone would really believe that. I can't believe anyone would really believe that things have suddenly gotten so terrible that otherwise decent, law-abiding citizens would suddenly turn to crime. If the day were to come that people were falling down in the streets from starvation, then, of course, that would be another matter. But that day is not here. That day will never be here.
A new name for President Reagan and his cabinet. I call them the aristocratic bums. They're all for the rich. They're taking away food stamps from the poor, which you must gloat on. You're just a bum. I call you a bum, but I call President Reagan aristocratic bums, and the whole bunch of them.
Well, at least
you're gloating on the poor people suffering.
At least
you really love your president, but he's a phony actor like you are. You're the same way. You're just an actor.
Well, I don't mind you calling me names, but I resent you calling the man.
Well, he is an aristocratic bum. His own kids don't want to have nothing to do with him.
Well, that's
He's
not
for the millionaires.
Well,
and why don't you say it like it is? And you're a bigger bum because you never had any compassion for these poor people on welfare, for the fixed income old people that have to eat dog food. You just laugh it off. You're all for the rich. That's all you are. You're another bum.
You love that.
I'm repeating.
You love that.
You wish I could tell you you're an aristocratic bum, but the president is, and his whole cabinet.
Hey,
the next election, you're going to see them all get out of there, those bums.
Listen,
including you.
You love that word bum.
No, well, you are. No, aristocratic.
Well,
President Reagan and his cabinet you love so much.
You love
and
that.
you're gloating that the poor people can't eat.
Hey, don't I get a word in? Don't I get a word in here?
Go ahead, I'll give you a chance.
Okay, thank you very much. Quickly, people forget. You see, that same guy that called just a moment ago, that distinguished gentleman who has a distaste for bums, aristocratic and plain bums like myself, he probably was complaining about Jimmy Carter a little over a year ago and the way he was ruining the economy and how inflation was raging out of control. And what are we going to do about inflation? And by the way, I never did ask that distinguished gentleman whether he was on welfare or not. But anyway, I guess I feel like a bum now. He called me bum so many times. I feel like a bum. I should have asked him for $2 for a cup of coffee. The critics, of course, are saying cut defense, and even I've suggested that maybe there's some places we can cut. They say cut defense, and yet they don't want to cut social spending. But defense, as I figure it, will now take about 29% of the budget, compared with 43%, which has been diverted to social benefit payments to individuals. Now, let's compare this with President Kennedy's defense spending. That was 44% of the budget. Lyndon Johnson's, Richard Nixon's, and Dwight Eisenhower's defense spending were just as high. Even at its highest projected figure, Reagan's defense spending by 1984 will be 36% of the budget. Now, And I think it's very important to keep something like that in mind, that the percentage of what the president wants for defense is still considerably less than the percentage wanted by Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, and Eisenhower.
This Rick Coon thing, Boston College, don't you think that penalty was a little severe?
Yes.
I mean, that's unbelievable.
10 years, heck, the guy he would have been better. He would have been better off if he'd have stabbed Richard Dan, like...
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. I mean, I can see making an example of somebody, but, I mean, I figure a couple of years, you know...
Hey, listen, on a point-shaving thing, it occurred to me, who gets hurt except the guys that are calling the bookies, like Paul Needlenose Minaj.
Right.
And saying, I want the Holy Cross, and I'll take the 5 points.
Right.
Serves those cabons right to lose.
Yeah,
And that about does it for today's session. That kicks things ahead for today. I'll be looking for you. And in the nonce, remember, get Gaddafi! And I know the Admiral La Rocque, although I think something, and I don't mean this in a crude way, I think something happened to the man. I think he lost his grip. At any rate, when we talks about curtailing abuses, anytime any politician talks about saving Social Security, anytime any politician talks about the disparity of Social Security escalator increments being greater than the inflation rate, someone like Claude Pepper comes out of the woodwork and says, don't tamper with Social Security, and 34 million senior citizens go bananas. And presidents get scared, no matter whether they come from California and are supposed to be conservative Republicans or not, they get scared. But the fact of the matter is, what we are experiencing today is because people kept saying, I want more, and every now and then someone like, say, Barry Goldwater, for example, and even a few years ago, Pat Moynihan, but he conveniently forgets that he warned against this too, they say, hey, when you get the bill, what are you going to do? And the people say, never mind the bill, just bring me more. Well, the bill's got to be paid. Oh, I've limited intelligence, but I'm not going to make it... No, Bob, don't hit the button. Bob, don't be a coward. Now, the man is a gifted actor because I didn't touch a thing. And he wants everybody... I got to give him credit. At least he's got imagination. There are going to be people who believe that I did hang up on him. Well, so be it. There's nothing I can do about it. But for those of you who don't have closed minds, I did not hang up on him. That's shtick. He was doing shtick, if you know what I mean. Admiral La Rocque is a very dangerous man because he would have us disarm unilaterally. So let's not talk about Admiral La Rocque.
Well, Bob, this is Phil. And I listened to you about Social Security and what you had to say about Congressman Pepper.
Yes.
About the people always asking for more.
Yes.
Asking for more.
Sure.
Well, I'd like to ask for a few things, too. One of the things that I'd like to ask is to find out why we keep 40,000 troops in Korea, why we keep another 50 in Japan. What have you got against Social Security? Why haven't you got something against the energy companies, the utility companies, the munition manufacturers that are licking their chops right now with this? And it's still there. It's still kicking. It don't need us. Look at little Israel. They don't need us. They seem to be doing all right. They what do you call it? Is that all you could come up with is Social Security, Bob?
Well, we were talking about the fact that the public is the fault of this whole situation here. I said it's we, the public, who are the cause of our problems. And as an illustration, I pointed out our reaction when someone tries to save Social Security. Now, for you to say that because I want to see Social Security saved, I'm against Social Security, makes no sense at all. As a matter of fact, Phil, in all candor, nothing you said made any sense. Beyond that, it was a brilliant comment. And I thank you very much, Phil. Are you there, Phil? I moved. He answered. Okay, Toby.
If Ronald Reagan is doing such a great job for the people, how do you, Mr. Grant, rationalize
is taking benefits from the poor and then giving $75 a day in the form of a tax shelter for expenses to all the congressmen.
Well, first of all,
to the tune of a...
First of all, he had nothing to do with the Congress taking advantage of... here's something Toby is not interested in. Toby couldn't care less, because Toby's a very partisan lady. But I'm sure that most people listening to this broadcast know Congress gave itself the deduction. The president did not give Congress that deduction. And to say anybody took away something from the poor implies that they had it to begin with. And they didn't have it to begin with. It's an 18-year-old sister. We were comparing notes with her 18-year-old sister and my 16-year-old daughter. And we both agreed we weren't prudes, but sex permeates everything. You can't watch a television program, whether it's JR slipping between the Pequots with somebody on Dallas, or these soap operas, any one of those that are absolutely obsessed totally with sex. And it gives young people a false sense of values. I'll give you another evidence of the moral decline, Anthony. Are you ready for this? You're sitting down?
I'm sitting down and waiting.
They have authorized, I don't think the news is known in general here in the tri-state area, they have authorized the expenditure of $150,000 of taxpayers' money in a park in San Francisco to commemorate gay liberation. And it shows a statue of two women together holding hands, and then two guys. One has an earring, so help me, and he has his arm around the other guy. I'm not making this up.
And I just want to say I really enjoy your show.
I knew he was going to do something strange. That's why I sat there very quietly. Not well. There are ill people, and why should this program be immune from their pathetic demonstrations of their illness any more than the streets of New York, which you see ill people walking. Some of them fool you because they're dressed fairly well, and yet there they are talking to themselves a mile a minute. It's sad, but life is a strain, and a lot of people just can't handle it.
The Admiral on, I differ with you the way you think about him, because I think he has a lot to say. First guy that was on Barry Gray, who's a communist, an out-and-out communist, and this guy I feel has a lot to say because...
Where are you from?
I'm from Brooklyn.
You've always lived in Brooklyn?
Not always, no.
Where are you from originally?
I'm from Brooklyn, but I lived in Israel for a couple of years.
Uh-huh. It's very curious that a person with your background would be so naive, because usually people from Israel are far more sophisticated when it comes to the Soviet menace and Soviet chicanery and the trickery of the communists.
I have...
Agree or not, Bill, the fact of the matter is you allowed a person to dupe you, and that doesn't speak well for you. You realize that he said the Soviet Union keeps its treaties when the record clearly shows they have never honored a treaty once?
Well, I'm not with them either.
Well, then how can you think that Admiral La Rocque is so wonderful? You said he had a great deal to say.
Well,
you're right. He does have a great deal to say. Just as Stalin had a great deal to say in the Kremlin in 1937.
I wanted to ask...
You know, everybody's eligible for another Social Security raise coming soon. And that's going to mean an added $15 billion coming out of the budget. People don't seem to realize that when you have somebody like Claude Pepper say, don't tamper with Social Security, what he fails to tell you is the Social Security is being tampered with every time they give the people a raise.
Right.
And I'm sick and tired of catering. I'm tired of catering to the worst, the most base elements in our society and in our character. And these people who think there really is something for nothing, these people who really think that they have a right to rip off a system that depends on other people breaking their backs, don't have my sympathy at all. And I am concerned with saving Social Security. I'm not attacking Social Security. I'm trying to save it. But, you know, the demagogues of this political system have gone around for such a long time, making people really believe they have a right to an endless, bottomless largesse. But you know better than that. I mean, people from Weehawken are smart. Well, we have a president who's trying to bring back a lot of things to their original purpose, and he's being vilified to such an extent that I don't know.
I agree with...
I think he's going to be wounded from this budget battle to such an extent that he may wind up being his own caretaker.
Yes, ma'am. UM said that the capitalists will fall into our hands like an overripe apple on their own free.
Oh, he's violating the 7-day rule. Violating the 7-day rule. Too bad.
I think that what we should do with the 10% we get in extra money from the tax cut, or what we should have gotten, was a proposal to send it to Russia because they're the very poor, to Poland. Do you want to take a shower with me?
I don't know what... females are doing this too. Females are cracking up too. Well, you see, the winter has been tough on everybody. Oh, my. Yes,
Two little things on Social Security. I'm getting a little tired of hearing so many people under 50 taking pot shots at these oldsters on Social Security these days. These oldsters aren't excrement. They built up this country. They fought and died for it. And do these people realize how many social programs these
oldsters... Well, if they died for it, then they're not receiving Social Security. What are you talking about? They fought and died for it.
What do you mean they fought and died? Anybody over 60...
Hey, look, pal, no one's...
Every other war.
Hey, look, pal, no one's attacking them. Nobody under 50 is attacking them. What we're trying to do is save the program for them and for you and for me. To the president of Sigma Alpha Epsilon at the University of Cincinnati, and had hoped to talk to either he or the chapter vice president, Chuck Strobel. And you may wonder, what am I doing? Am I going to matriculate at the University of Cincinnati? No, I was going to call because of the fact that this particular chapter of this particular university at the University of Cincinnati is on suspension right now, and there's some big machers from the NAACP that want the fraternity suspended for 2 whole years. That means they just can't participate in any way. That means they close it down. Did you know what the Sigma Phi Alpha Epsilon fraternity did on the 17th of January that is so egregious that they should have such a punishment? By the way, forget about the United States Constitution and the First Amendment. Forget about it. These certain people in this country only want the First Amendment exercised if it agrees with their party line. What did Sigma Alpha Epsilon do that was so outrageous that they should lose their right of... Well, what they did do, I'll give you a hint. What they did do was dumb, just plain dumb, stupid. But fraternities do a lot of dumb things. What they did do, I'll give you another hint, was in very poor taste. What they did do perhaps should offer an apology for anybody who may have been offended. But I'll tell you something. What they did do was in their own fraternity house, for anybody who had been invited to the fraternity, for anybody who did arrive. Give you any hints? Well, if anybody knows, I'd like them to... This is
just tell what happened. A fraternity ran a party, and they sent out invitations and asked those who came to the party to bring a welfare check, a father if they had one, and a radio bigger than their head. Now, the president of Cincinnati, who was at Rutgers in Newark, I knew him then, was just as spineless in Cincinnati as he was in Newark when these things happened in Newark. So
But you see, you didn't tell the audience what the motif of the party was.
I've forgotten that, Bob. I know what happened.
The motif was because on the 15th was someone's birthday.
Oh, yes. Now I see now what it was, yes.
It, Marty.
It was Martin Luther King's birthday.
Right, and it was supposed to be a Martin Luther King birthday celebration a la this fraternity's rather extremely poor taste fun quote-unquote fun.
May I first, he is doing the same thing it did when it curtailed the freedom of speech of people with controversial ideas. William Shockley, Henry Kissinger, Walt Rostow.
Absolutely.
And this is the same tradition. It's no different.
Well, we tried to get the fraternity on the line. They are so scared, they are so shook, that they're afraid to even talk to us. They don't know who's calling. They don't know. Caspar Weinberger thinks we should let the default occur. Secretary Haig believes that it would be bad for the alliance because particularly West Germany and France would be very upset if we allowed the default.
Oh.
And we don't want to get Helmut Schmidt or Francois Mitterrand or any foreigner mad because it's more important that they're happy with us. I don't know why. I don't know what they do for us. But this president is succumbing to the same line of thinking that all his predecessors had in foreign affairs. Yeah.
In tax.
Perhaps we could use a dictator here for the next 2 or 3 years, such in the form of Mussolini. Perhaps straighten out.
Well, he's dead. He's dead. Will I do?
Well, pardon me?
Mussolini's dead. So since he's dead, will I do? I'll shave my head. And I'll stand on a balcony, and I'll say, a tutti quanti, voglio mazza tutti quanti. Tu sei proprio uno cornuto. How's that? Pretty good imitation of Mussolini?
I don't understand.
Yeah, well, I
mean, I'm just saying,
made a speech.
What's going on today.
Right. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay. The man lent a great deal of intellectual sophistication to our dialogue here.
I've been waiting for so long that I just decided to say that it wouldn't cost me nothing to wait till 6 o'clock for you till you emerge from the WMCA building. I'll be waiting for you.
What am I supposed to do?
Oh, I should say I'll be looking for you, or you'll be looking for me.
Who are you imitating?
I don't know. Some punk friend, probably, of yours.
Yeah, the guy's trying to imitate me. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, say your influence counts. Use it.
Yeah, right. No. First
the guy stumbled. I gave him his one chance, and he bobbled. It's tough. Whenever anybody is opposed to a candidate, ladies and gentlemen, they always say, "What has he done?" Okay, listen, look. You like Jim Emery? Fine. I hope you get a chance to vote for him in the primary. If he wins the primary, I hope for your sake. And, well, listen, I wish him well. I know Jim Emery. I like Jim Emery. Most like you. Thank you very much, dear.
Wait a minute. One thing.
Yeah?
Bob?
Hello?
Bob.
Bob, that's me, yeah.
They're going to anoint you a saint.
They're going to anoint me a saint?
That's right.
Why?
You don't drink. You don't smoke. You don't gamble. But remember what Grandpa said.
What did Grandpa say?
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Well.
Thank you.
Okay, Cabon. And yet, as you heard, if you listened to the very fine program, special edition, Monday through Friday on WMCA, last Tuesday, the reporters reporting for Newsweek magazine, saying the same things that we heard in other places, the same thing we heard in Nicaragua, the same thing we heard in Vietnam. Somehow or other, these leftist revolutionaries seem to capture the imagination of our reporters all too often. What is there? What is there about the left? Who, by the way, has never, and I ask you, I ask you, we're just here having a conversation, one big happy family, I ask you, where is the left once they have seized power? Where have they ever allowed democracy to function? A man by the name of Alexander Dubček tried that in 1968. He said, let us put a human face on socialism. You know what happened there. You know what happened there. But I would like to share with you the feeling that Ed Asner, as a union head, has no business involving that union with our foreign policy. Beyond that feeling of principle is the actual thrust of his remarks. He said, quote, that the enemies of our State Department are not his enemies. Would Ed Asner apply that same independent rule to each and every issue that comes before the United States on the world stage? How would Ed Asner feel, for example, if some other group were to come along and say, the Enemies of the United States in the Middle East are not our enemies. How many foreign policies can a nation have? Yes, Frank.
Yeah, Bob, that wasn't me to start off 2 weeks ago. I didn't violate the 7-day rule. There's a screwball out there who played a tape recording of me, and he called you up and you thought that was me. But, Bob, I wanted to talk to you about Ed Asner's comments about El Salvador.
Right.
Well, Bob, Ed Asner is one of what President Nixon calls the political trendies. And they're trying to do the same job on us in El Salvador that they did in Vietnam. When they say, hadn't we learned our lesson from Vietnam, it's the big lie. We were told that these people would be agrarian reformers, eager to unite their country, and that's all they wanted. But we've seen a Holocaust in Southeast Asia comparable to that of Eastern Europe that were perpetrated by the Vietnamese. We've seen the establishment of puppet governments in Cambodia and Laos. I'd like to know, what does Ed Asner and the Parlor Pinks, what do they have to say about 20,000 Cubans that are in Angola, 10,000 Cubans that are in the Horn of Africa? Why is it that they get so upset when the United States tries to reform a regime, but they're absolutely silent while these communist regimes commit wholesale genocide on a scale that's never been seen on the face of the earth before?
Well, Frank, I think the inescapable answer is, and I know you've come to this, I've come to it reluctantly. I tried to get the formula to work so that I would come up with a different answer, but the inescapable answer is, as long as it's from the left, as long as it comforts Moscow, they're for it. That doesn't mean that they themselves have sworn allegiance to Moscow. I don't think consciously many of them have. But there is something about their backgrounds, their upbringing, their training. Maybe they were traumatized by a parent who couldn't get over the fact that we had a depression in the 1930s. Anyway, whatever the reason, they have been so traumatized that in their heart of hearts, they're Marxists, socialists, and in some cases even communists.
I'm sorry, Bob?
No, really. I reluctantly come to that conclusion for many of the individuals that you just described.
And you know, Bob, you say that by the year 2000, this country will no longer exist as we know it. And I heartily concur with you. And I wonder, what will they say by the year 2000 when their children or their grandchildren ask them, why did you stand by and do nothing while they took our freedom?
The only solace I will have, if you even want to call it solace, is that they will suffer more than any of us, because they have used their liberty as license, and they will have lost their license in addition to their liberty. When liberty is misused, when liberty is abused, when the respect one has for what one possesses is gone, then, and only then, do you find people grasping at programs, at philosophies, at, yes, even governments that are bankrupt, that have proven themselves bankrupt and are not really the answer to whatever ills they may imagine, but represent a greater problem. And someone like Ed Asner is typical of what I have been fighting against all my life. My own union has had its share of Ed Asner's. I thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Bob.
Philip Agee and Mr. La Rocque, enemies of this country, the damage that they've done to the USA is appalling. And of course, I'm very concerned now with Ed Asner. I hear his statements about every other day. He has the gall, the audacity to advocate a communist victory in El Salvador. Of course, that's all we need. It's not only a violation of the Monroe Doctrine, but it will have a debilitating effect on the USA. And how Mr. La Rocque could make a statement that Cuba, we have nothing to worry about communist dictatorship in Cuba. I mean, this is really out of line. I mean,
well, La Rocque, I think, is so flagrant that he really is not dangerous. After, he uses enough rope. He hangs himself very quickly. I'm concerned, however, with the fact that we haven't learned, apparently, as I see it, we haven't learned that the people like Ed Asner, who his type of mentality really ruined us in Southeast Asia, turned the Cubans over to Castro, turned Nicaragua over to Sandinistas, and here we go again. It's amazing. thing going on and on. I want to commend our two people. I want to commend Jeane Kirkpatrick, our ambassador to the UN, criticizing liberals for supporting what she calls Marxist guerrilla movements in Latin America. And I also want to commend Sander Van Oker. I know some of you may be surprised because Sander Van Oker, for many, many years, was an unabashed, very proud, very outspoken liberal. Sander Van Oker, yesterday on Coast to Coast Television, wanted to know why we didn't bring back the Monroe Doctrine. He wanted to know why there was a Brezhnev Doctrine, which seemed to give the Russians license to go into Czechoslovakia, Poland, Hungary, anywhere it chose. But we don't employ the Monroe Doctrine. Did you? In addition to what Asner said, he actually presented a check for $25 to buy medical supplies for the Marxist guerrillas.
Yes.
For the leftist forces that once they do gain power, and they will, they will.
As in Nicaragua.
As they did in Nicaragua, as they can anywhere they wish, because the United States is so divided, is so weakened, is so traumatized by its Vietnam experience.